All right, it's great to see everyone again. Dustin Pearson coming from just outside of Kansas City, Missouri. I'm joined by my good friend Dawn Harris, a high school English teacher just north of Cincinnati. Dawn took a different path to education. She taught overseas in Japan, worked in the corporate field, corporate marketing, and until the economic crash of 2008, 2009, made a change and went back into the classroom. So, Dawn, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Dustin. Thank you for inviting me today.
Absolutely. So, describe your previous career as in marketing. You worked in Dayton, Ohio. So, describe what you did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I worked at a company called Ellen Berry, which was a Yellow Page publishing company. So we worked initially with Bell South to manufacture Yellow Pages, and eventually moved in with AT&T. We started, before I left, really getting involved in digital marketing and online sales when the internet really started to boom in terms of advertising and generating revenue from online advertising sales. But really, I started out as a graphic designer. I was making ads for Yellow Pages. After doing that, moved into a publishing role where I was providing some guidance and support to teams who worked to really just assemble the books as a whole. From there, that evolved into working with marketing to develop new products going into the telephone books, different ad sizes and line items and different sections of the phone book, where I worked with sales reps to train them on those new products and get those out to customers so that they could get their business presence, in front of people with books in their hands. But as you know, with the internet really coming onto stage in the early 2000s, the Yellow Pages just really started to become this, dying breed of product. And so so much changed, and it was difficult for that company to kind of rapidly evolve with the market. I mean, although they did a good job at it, it was just that it couldn't hold with everything that was going on economically and the transition in 2008, and the bottom falling out of it, as we refer to it. They just dissolved. And so with that, I found myself saying, hey, am I going to continue this route? It's going to be tough, right? Coming back from the recession and finding a job in marketing, or do I want to do something different this time? So that led me to education.
Absolutely. And it's tough, when you're working, with the Yellow Pages, you can kind of see the demand of it kind of go less and less, especially as the 2000s went on. I remember every year we would get that big, thick Yellow Page at our front door that would be, this thick.
Yes.
I think it would get smaller and smaller, and then we wouldn't get it anymore. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So your previous career working in marketing, how did that help you transition essentially back into the classroom?
Yeah, so a couple of things. It was really great to have the outside experience in the private sector, because when I came into the classroom, excuse me, for me, it was more about, the testing aspect and getting kids, prepared to take this assessment. And I was familiar coming into it with student assessment practices. I had my own son who was in elementary school at the time. And so I was familiar with testing, but I was more focused on coming into the classroom, helping students to acquire the skills that I knew employers would need, that I knew they would need if they were going to go back to college. Being fresh out of college myself, being a parent, knowing what the workplace is going to demand. In the English classroom, I could teach them to effectively access the kinds of information, texts, resources, materials that were necessary for them to compete in this global economy, and to have the skills, the writing skills, the communication skills, just to be effective at work or to be effective in the college classroom. And by default, having that background and bringing that to class really helped kids to be successful on the test that they would subsequently take as a part of their education. So, I've not been one to focus wholeheartedly on, um, obviously not teaching to the test, but really driving into the curriculum the need to include test practice, preparation for the test. I just communicate to my kids, what, life is a test, and we need to be ready to tackle it from all angles. So the better we can read, the better we can write, the better we can think, the better prepared we're going to be for anything. So that's my focus with them, is really conscientious critical thinking, using your common sense, knowing what you need to know when you get out of this place called school, and learning to do those things while you're with me in the classroom. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know when I have meetings with my kids and I just have those conversations, I say it to my freshmen, before you know it, you're going to be out of these doors and on your own, where there's not going to be people there to hold your
Absolutely.
hands. And that these 4 years of high school literally absolutely fly by. I felt like yesterday, my seniors were freshmen. And so they even tell me, wow, this really goes by quick. I'm like, hey, I've been in the game for a while. I kind of know how it goes. So, um,
Hmm.
so a lot of those skills that you're
Most
teaching your
definitely.
students, I do as well, especially with my students. They really need a lot of assistance with self-advocacy. If they need something, you have to voice
Mhm.
that. You have to communicate that. I tell the story. If you're in the lake and unfortunately, if you're drowning, if you're not waving your arms, we can't save you. We have to know that you need help with something. So, we can be there for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So one of the
Couldn't agree
things,
with that more.
yeah,
Advocacy and self-advocacy is hugely important.
yeah, and it's just simple things. I tell my students, when you are absent, you have to go to your educators to find out what you missed. Don't ask me. Number one, you know, I'm not the person to go to, but say you miss science class, you need to go to that teacher. Hey, what did I miss in class so I can, get that stuff done? The teacher isn't going to just hand it to you when you walk in the door. You have to voice that yourself.
Right. And also helping them to understand that, and this has been a challenge for me moving into high school, um, really getting a grasp on this past year, because when I taught high school before, about 9 years ago, we weren't anywhere near one-to-one. We were not, we had computers on occasion, when we had the chance to get a card or get into a lab. Now we are a one-to-one district. And I moved into high school really kind of taking for granted, oh, my kids are tech savvy. They know to set up their Google Calendar when when they join a classroom, or they know to check the category to look for the latest unit that we're working on. Those are all assumptions. I failed in making those assumptions, and so we had to have some discussion together about what are the things that we need to do to advocate for ourselves, to help make sure that we have ourselves in order, right? And if I'm not sure, then what do I do? Like, just sitting back and waiting isn't an option, but also helping them to understand that, hey, you know what? You've got 6 or 7 different teachers in a day. We are all each different kinds of teachers with different expectations. That's a lot for a student, but at the same time, to your point, we have to be able to teach them to advocate, to speak up and communicate when things are, difficult, or they're struggling, or they need some help. Just simply getting organized. What is it I need to do? And you hit the nail on the head. Absenteeism is a huge problem for many of our students, and it's overwhelming when they get behind and they come back to school, and it's like, where do I even begin? So we have to help them with their voice and developing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, you know, again, I want the students to, speak up and voice and speak for themselves. Yes, it's great when the parents do that, but their parents aren't going to be able to do that to them when they're in the work. Sorry about that.
Yes.
I have
Yes.
bout of
No, you're fine.
allergies. So, the parents aren't going to be able to be there when they're
I
working,
understand.
the student's going to have to do that themselves. And so I can't stress enough how important it is. And especially with, having technology, they can send an email, they can send a Google Hangout. There are so many
Right.
tools that they can do without, verbally saying it if they're nervous about that. You know, I was a student, I hated raising my
Correct.
hand and asking a question in front of peers. It's just the way I was. But I could go up to the teacher after class when nobody
Yeah.
was in there and just, shoot the breeze if I wanted to. Um, and it's one of those things that
Right.
self-advocacy, it starts really day one, and it's just a lot of practice and a lot of patience, because if you don't start right away, it's going to be very hard to catch up throughout the year.
It is. And a big part of that too is the relationship building piece, right? As educators, we need to be able to kind of, put our finger on, the pulse of the classroom and feel, how is everybody feeling about this communication piece from the beginning? Do they feel confident in themselves as communicators? And then through our relationships with them, figure out, how do each of these students best communicate? Because if they are a good writer and email communicator, then maybe that's the best avenue for them.
Mhm.
But letting them know through our discussions with them, hey, that's okay too. You can communicate that way. And while maybe they have a better relationship with a different teacher that they feel like they can just come up to, they've got to plan for those kinds of conversations. And we need to help figure out, the kinds of learners, the kinds of communicators that we have in our classroom, and offer them strategies for being able to do that. We cannot, it's easy, again, just going back to my original assumption, it's easy to just assume that kids are ready or know how to do something. And they may even know how to do it, but just really helping to direct them in actually going ahead and doing it.
Absolutely. And so going back to communication and really that communication model, there's three ways. There's the linear, there's the interaction, then there's the transactional. Linear, me and you are having a conversation. Interaction, I say something to you, you say something back to me. And transactional, I say something and you're able to do something. So what are some skills you teach your students on communicating?
So communicating, when I think about communicating in the classroom, and I actually, in my work at Wright State University, I teach a class called Communication Arts for Educators. And one of the first things that we talk about in that class is communication starts with critical thinking, right? We've got to figure out exactly, first of all, why are we communicating in the first place? What are we trying to figure out? What are we trying to solve? What do we need? What are we trying to provide, right? And so figuring out first, what is that thinking that's going on in our brains that we want to articulate, right, that we want to give voice to, and then finding the best avenue for doing that. When we're teaching kids in the classroom to communicate, we might be asking them to present a speech, on some topic where they're going to inform us or persuade us about something, or we might ask them to do some kind of writing where we want them to, construct an essay. I have a unit that I do with my students, my junior students, for some ACT prep, which is the Credo Project. And it consists of building a Google-based site that becomes a blog where they're pushing content out to their school public. And so it's really, for me, when I think about teaching communication, yes, all of the language skills, right? We need to make sure that we can articulate what it is we have to say. We need to make sure that we're able to put our thoughts into words or give voice to those orally. But it really starts with the purpose, the question, the thinking. What is it that we really are trying to convey? Every communication has a purpose. What is that? What's my best resource for getting my message out? And then how do I go about doing it?
Absolutely. And these are all, great, strategies that you're doing. So what is some of the growth that you're seeing from students coming from the beginning of it to the very end? Are they developing more confidence? What sorts of things?
Yes. Yeah. Competence and confidence, both. We really dig in from the very beginning of the year in my classroom. We really dig into that thinking piece. I'm big on essential questions. I'm always putting questions out there, that really push students thinking, but that also ask them to engage in finding supports to their responses, which is what we're supposed to be doing, right? We want evidence-based answers with reasons and explanations. That's what the curriculum says. That's what we're supposed to do. But really, that's what life says. And I say, listen, folks, if you want to win arguments, if you want people to listen to you, you have to bring it. You got to find the information that you need that's going to help to prove that you're right. I'm like, you want to win arguments? Let's do this. So we start there, and we become just conscientious consumers of media, right? What kind of information are we looking at? Let's dissect it. Can we use it? Should we use it? Right? Then we figure out ways to kind of put that into our writing, and we find ways to articulate that. How can we present that to our peers to help educate and inform them as well? And so what we see then in doing that is skills building, right? Where kids are learning to read, be effective readers, to write and produce high quality content. And then once they have developed that competence, then they go ahead and practice, right? Practice, which allows them to build confidence. Because what they know is, if I can take my thoughts and I can write them down and I can support them, then when I tell somebody, because I've practiced this enough, I've got some credibility. People will listen to me. And so that's one of the big hurdles, though, that we have to get to. And I wait. We do a lot of informal presentation in the class. Obviously, kids are always having the chance to talk, but as far as getting up in front of people, I want them to feel as competent as they possibly can with those the information gathering skills, research gathering, figuring out what evidence they're going to use, building reasoning and explanations into their responses before they actually start getting up and really doing full-on persuasive kinds of discussions in class, because I want them to feel confident about what they're doing. So it's a process. But by the end, of the year, students just are engaged and ready to share information. High school kids, for the most part, are always ready to share information, but mostly now they're ready to share because they have the goods to back up what it is that they want to say. So definitely competence and competence together.
Absolutely. And those are great points, and it really speaks to a lot of things. And so when you're talking with your students and you're doing these things with you, and again, like you said, it's a process. Rome wasn't built in a day. So how difficult is it to, actually do that spoken word with their peers? It's one thing to just, have a conversation with you. It's another thing to, talk with their peers. We have our devices, it seems like we send all our messages via text or whatever. How difficult is that confidence piece to actually speak with their peers?
For some, Dustin, it is challenging, right? Kids, they're human beings too, and not everyone, is an extrovert. Not everyone feels comfortable getting up in front of a group, even if they do feel confident. We just have different personalities. And so for me, what's important is helping students to find ways to give voice to their thinking through a number of different channels. If it just comes down to a student just does not feel comfortable, not because they're competent or even confident, they just don't feel comfortable getting in front of a group, students always have the option to share with me in person, one-on-one. My goal is never to make a student feel uncomfortable. I think that's the goal of every teacher. I haven't met a teacher yet that has really pushed those kinds of activities on students that just feel uncomfortable with it. But also giving them different avenues for sharing their information. I like to use Flipgrid in class, giving kids the chance to record themselves on their own. It's another way that they can share themselves communicating out loud via a presentation of sorts by recording themselves and sharing it with either just me, small groups of their peers, or their whole class is another option. And also working with small groups to do smaller presentations within a circle of friends. I like to do Socratic seminars in my classroom. And I like to do the fishbowl approach, where we have an outer group looking at an inner group, but I also like to do smaller Socratic circles where students are with a closer group, maybe 5, 6 people, and they have just the chance to communicate in a smaller setting too. So there's a number of ways that we can allow avenues for students to share their thinking.
Absolutely, and Flipgrid has been a great tool, especially with distance learning. We use it a lot for, those SEL check-ins, just how they're doing. I know with my students, one of the things that I always have them do, I have them go talking to the wall. It may sound kind of foolish, but, they need to practice actually verbally saying it, because I tell them, if you're proofreading something, if you read it, in your head, it's going to say what you want it to say. If you're able to verbally speak it out, you're going to catch mistakes that you may have made, and you can kind of make those adjustments. And so, in my classroom, my students move around a lot. They're always interacting with their peers, and so we'll practice in small groups, maybe 2 or 3. They may practice with me, and then by the end, that confidence will start to develop, and so they're able to speak with, a larger group. But just kind of doing it in stages, I have found, to help that student, get their voice out, get that projection, make sure it says everything that they want it to say and that it needs to say, and then practicing it with smaller groups.
Yes, I agree. And Christina Smeckens of Smeckens Education uses the telephone strategy.
Mm-hmm.
She gives kids just an old-fashioned, kind of like a rotary phone handle, and lets the kids kind of talk into the phone and read their script or their speech or whatever it is they have, to just hear it, right? And that's one of the things that I tell kids all the time, is the first step to best communication is you've got to look at what is it that you want to say. Are you saying it correctly? Let yourself hear it. You've got to hear what you have written. That's where you find your errors, beyond just simple grammar, spelling, sentence construction, but also in your ideas and your concepts. You got to hear it out loud. So lots of peer editing and peer review before we finalize anything in class. I'm an advocate of that for sure. So
absolutely. And just, and it allows your students, to practice seeing those things, making those corrections, having those conversations with their peers on hearing feedback, and then taking that feedback, I call it coaching time, and then making their piece even better. So absolutely, I'm a huge proponent of peer review. All right, so the next part, okay, we're going to look at Bloom's taxonomy. Okay, so what I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so I'm going to have this pulled up. Okay, so we have create, we have evaluate, analyze, apply, understand, remember. Okay, as an educator, okay, where do you see your strengths at when it comes to using this pyramid?
Where do I see my strengths? I don't know. I really, ultimately, I don't know that I could necessarily speak to my strengths as a whole. I like to apply them all, but my favorite is just getting the kids to analyzing, evaluating, and creating. I want to spend as little time as possible on remember, understand, and apply, even though it's absolutely necessary, right? We have kids that need remember, understand, and apply. We've got to get them those base level skills they need to get to the higher order thinking. And that's where the magic happens, as I like to say. When we can get kids into that more critical analysis of the concepts and the ideas and the content that we're sharing with them in class, that's where the learning happens, right? And so finding ways to get them through those bottom levels of Bloom's taxonomy, helping them to identify the vocabulary, what are earlier concepts that they may have reviewed or that we need to review from previous learning. Let's get to that, figure out what we need to get through so that we can start to dig deeper within the content and get to what are those ideas and skills and activities that are going to allow us to be creators. Ultimately, that's what we're looking to teach kids, right? They've got to go out into the world someday, and they have to themselves find a way to make their living. And most of the time, well, all of the time, that's through doing something. and being hands-on with things. And we don't want to put citizens in the world who are in jobs where they're just understanding and applying and understanding and applying day after day after day. The kinds of jobs that grown-ups enjoy are the jobs where we get to dig deeper into ideas and we get to produce new things that help others and get to serve others by being, conscientious of the world around us. So remember, understand, apply is extremely important, right? We have to do those things early on in order to get kids to that next level. And that's where differentiation is absolutely critical, because Dustin, getting kids on the same page in class is not easy. Differentiating is what we do. That is our job. Kids enter into, Ian Bird talks about, lowering floors and raising ceilings, a concept that comes from Joe Bowler. And he helps through his work and his writing us to understand, in this case particular as it relates to gifted kids, that we've got to give different entry points for kids. And while we all may complete the same summative activity at the end by creating something new or evaluating something, there are going to be students who need extension or enrichment activities. And so the pyramid itself is fluid, right? We have kids that are moving from one level to the next, and sometimes between levels, depending on where they are, simply because of where they are in their learning coming into a lesson, an activity, a project, something like that. So they are all very, very, very important. But, obviously, as with anyone, that analyze, evaluate, create piece is just so exciting to watch happen.
Absolutely. And you make so many good points. And so I know that whenever I look at this pyramid, like you said, understand, remember, that's our foundation part. It's easy, like say doing in history, which is what I teach. Yeah, you can recall facts and some concepts like some vocabulary, but that's your foundation. When you build that, that's the foundation of the house. Being able to apply that, yeah, you can be assessed on that, but you're limited on what you can do. Okay. But there's a reason why these top three are small. Okay. They're the most difficult to teach. It's going to require that collaboration, but you're going to see the most growth. You're really going to see those kids do, that agency, that transformational learning. So what are some examples of create and evaluate that you've done with your students? What are just a couple, tasks that you've had your kids done off the top of your head? I know it's several, but if you could pick maybe a couple, off the top of your head, what are some things that you've had your kids do in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. Two of my favorites that I've worked on in the last couple of years with students. One I mentioned previously to you was the Credo Project. And one of the things that we do with the Credo Project is primarily to help kids get ready, my juniors get ready for the ACT. The English and reading portions of the ACT and even the writing portion, there are a lot of skills in there that students should have mastered by the time they get ready to take the ACT. So what we do is we go back to remember, understand, and apply. And for that portion of the project, the Credo project that we work on, we start to go back in and review elements of the English language, grammar, conventions, even spelling, sentence structure. We use Strunk and White's elements of style and as our guide to really grasp the concepts and skills we need to construct proper written responses. And so those activities that we engage in the Credo Project consist of Pear Deck collaborative games and activities, and taking some practice ACT tests and just deconstructing them, not actually taking the test itself, but let's look at the question and kind of break those down. What strategies do we see at work here with regard to the writing, and what concepts and skills have been applied with regard to choosing the right answer. So with the Credo Project, we also read Robert Fulham's own personal collection of essays based on his credo, All I Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. And so from that, we start looking at even his collection and finding, it's crazy. I love his book, but you know, there are errors in any kind of writing. And the kids go in and they're like, what? Oh my gosh, look at this, check this out. That, one, shows me they have developed competence. Two, it shows me that through them being able to identify, hey, Robert Fulham, even though he wrote this book that sold a gazillion copies, people make mistakes. I have the confidence now that I can go out and do the same thing. Then we're able to move into that analyze, evaluate piece right there as we continue to look at Fulham's writing, we look at other pieces of writing, we continue to evaluate the test, and then we create. We create our own Google site where we share our own personal credo, our kind of value system, if you will, from which all other, excuse me, all other pieces of writing on the blog kind of descend from. We create mind maps where we analyze our personal interests and values, the things that we love, the things that we hate, and we use those to pull writing into our Google-based site, and all of that goes back to this original credo that we built this entire platform from. So we go from, okay, what do we know about grammar and conventions and the English language and writing, to evaluating another piece of work, to, all right, I'm going to take everything that I know and I'm going to now be that one who pushes content out for others to consume and to enjoy and that they can learn from. So that's one of my favorites that my junior class has really enjoyed. With my 8th grade gifted students in the previous year, we did passion projects. So we had mini genius hour of sorts, and it was really centered on service learning, and what can we create or could we create that we could push out into our community to help improve our society, right? And so the students really focused on, in that project, be it that it was a co-curricular project, we were in class learning the basic concepts of ELA, that remember, understand, apply, figurative language. We talked about different elements of media literacy, using propaganda, using communication tools, variety of communication tools, to eventually develop our own platform, a web-based platform, where again, students were pushing out content that was available to anyone who had access to those links that the students generated. And they were sharing their ideas, again, honing their English language arts skills and sharing those ideas with the public. We actually put together an entire fair last spring for those students who were featured in our local newspaper, and they were able to bring in the community to look at some of the ideas that they had created for improving our local area, and it was just really fantastic.
That is so cool. And the fact, one of the reasons why I love teaching ELA is that how you can take it in so many directions. You can have almost a project-based sort of format. You can have that collaborative. There's so many ways you can take that. And you mentioned Strunk and White. When I think of that textbook, I go back to college. In my history classes, the professor said, you need to get this book. It's at the bookstore. You're going to need it for this class. And so those of you that are going to be listening to this, it's not a very big book. You can fit it in the back of your pocket, but pretty much everything you need to know about English and writing, it's in that book. It's like the size of a checkbook. It's very small, but it has so much information, and it'll really, really help you a lot.
Yes, I agree, Dustin. And one of the things we talk about this in class, and I tell kids, hey, this is the book that I learned basically everything that I know about writing from in college, and I'm sharing it with you because it's really important. And some of the kids will say, but Mrs. Harris, I know I'm not going to college. And I say, and that's okay, because you're going to go to a job where you're going to have to type an email. or you might have to fill in some kind of a report, and you have to write sentences, and you have to create documents. You might have to, one of my jobs in my former profession as a marketer was basically constructing guidebooks, you know, how to complete a process. And so I tell them, you're going to still be doing those things, whether you go to, you know, into career tech, whether you go to a community college or a trade school. When you come out, you still have to read, and you still have to write, and you still have to know how to do it well, right? Because somebody's going to be consuming what you're putting out. So even though this is ACT prep, when we do the Credo Project, it's still giving you the kinds of life skills that you need to be able to go out and just conduct your everyday business.
Absolutely. And it's great that you're able to, for those students, and again, it's not a bad thing at all. You know, you know, really only a small number of students can handle a 4-year university. And so those students that don't go to college, that's perfectly fine. But again, they're going to have to be literate, being able to read and process these materials. So with the classroom being a collaborative environment, okay, the same goes for teaching. How are you able to collaborate with your peers on sharing some of this information and take some of the information that your peers share and bringing it into your classroom?
Gosh, that is one thing I absolutely love. First of all, I am super blessed to be working with an amazing English department at my high school. We are just really, really close knit, and we work together really well. And everyone is always sharing information, what they found. I couldn't ask for a better group of people to work with. But I've also found that it's important too to step outside your immediate circle and find other connections, just like we've connected, Dustin. I mean, we have just learned and grown together over the last few weeks. It's been such a short period of time, and man, I mean, I feel like we have known each other forever, and we'll continue to learn and grow from one another. So the important thing for me is just really reaching out. I try to reach out to anyone and everyone possible who has something that I know will help me to become a better teacher. You know, self-efficacy is really important. We have to really evaluate ourselves as educators in order to be effective. You know who we are as an individual. What do we bring to the classroom? How can we help to inspire and engage, you know, motivate kids? What are the kinds of things that we need to do? How does who I am as an educator it impacts the things that happen in my classroom in a day? And we get that through developing ourselves by our contacts and communications with others. We do that by being reflective. You know, we do that by seeking out opportunities to make improvements. And that was one of the reasons that I decided to go ahead and start my blog last year, was just to share information about what I've learned, but also to have the opportunity to be reflective in my approach to looking at my practice. And through that writing, through my work, I've made some amazing connections that have just led me to be able to continue to develop myself as a teacher. I heard a few years ago, Kathy Lassiter, she spoke at a conference, the Ohio School Improvement Institute, and she spoke about having the attitude in education, no matter how many years you're in education, you will never have arrived, right? Don't ever think that you have made it there, and that we are all continual works in progress, and that through our situations, our experiences, the things that happen in our lives every day, you know, we change as educators a little bit. You know, nothing is static in life, and we have to look at our approach to teaching that way, is that we've got to be able to adapt and continually refine ourselves and our practice. So for me, it's just making connections with others who we can learn and grow together, so that we can help students themselves learn and grow. That is so, so important.
Absolutely. And you really raised a great point on asking who you are as an educator. And so when I sit and I think about that question, okay, number one, I'm present. Number one, I'm a communicator. I'm a relationship builder. I also bring a lot of innovation. I bring a lot of compassion. I bring a lot of pedagogy. And I bring a lot of that mindset on being mindful, your feelings, working with others, and using that to help you grow as an individual. So I bring a lot to the table, and I'm a communicator with peers. I have to communicate with others. Just because I teach special education, I have to communicate. They expect that from me. And so, some may say I'm an over communicator, but I cannot not be a communicator. My staff needs to know what's going on with my students, their accommodations, what they need help with, that sort of thing. So I have to be there, present for that, and I have to get them involved. I have to reach out to those teachers, those parents, those administrators, and have those conversations with them. So it's wearing a lot of hats. It's talking, it's taking a lot of notes, it's taking their feedback, their data, and putting it all together, for the betterment of these students. And another thing is that I have to be pushed. I constantly want to get better. I want to collaborate with educators like you, Dawn, and educators all over the world, and really improve my practice and get to where I want to be. And you also made a great point on never thinking you've arrived. Unfortunately, I've worked with a lot of teachers in the past that think they've arrived and they just kind of go through the motions. That doesn't do our students any good. They need to have that push. They need to have that innovation, that growth mindset, because, 21st century workforce is going to demand that from them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what I love most about what you're saying, Dustin, in all of this is that while teachers focus on improving themselves, while we have a focus on what do I bring to students, how can I improve myself as an educator, we're doing it all for our students, right? It's not, while it's for us to be better for our kids. You talk about all of the things that you bring, and I know that you also bring, Dustin, like I do and like all of my peers do. We bring love, right, to the classroom. And that's the number one most important thing that we can bring, letting kids see our human side, that we really are people, not just their teachers, that we have lives, that we love and care about them. You focused in your comment there on the relationship building piece and how critical that is. And I would add to that the respect piece, right? Our kids need to know that we love and we care about them, and we're doing everything that we can to be the best possible teacher for them. And we've also got to find ways to show them respect, to show, that we know they're human too. While they may be our children in the classroom, it doesn't mean we can't show them respect. And we can show them that by being the best that we can be and treating them with dignity and showing them how to be compassionate and empathetic, but also how to be hard workers. You said we wear so many hats, and we do, my goodness, in a day, the things we have to do, even in distance learning, this, right? I mean, we are non-stop as distance learning facilitators, and that doesn't stop. And I think the most challenging thing for us, and I love seeing this, and I've noticed this on social media in the last few weeks, is how many educators are really trying to ramp up their skills as it pertains to distance learning, but not for the sake of just ruling out the distance learning practices, but to still maintain those relationships with kids, even when we can't see them face to face in the classroom. And so I love that, in so many ways, educators have been able to connect, and we've been able to find ways to learn from one another about how to make distance learning easier for everyone, so that we can still focus deeply on building those relationships that we need to have with kids so desperately.
Absolutely. And I could not agree more. I tell my students, that for that first day or so, I can't teach you unless I get to know you. And it's not just learning, what you do well in the classroom, but it's learning who you are as a person. And you can't trust me without getting to know me. So it takes that vulnerability on our end. And it's also getting to know those students and teaching them, to love themselves. For some students, that's a lot harder than others. But, loving who they are as individuals, understanding what they bring to the table and being proud of that. So that's another thing, that I bring to the table as an educator that I really share, with my kids as well, as that, yeah, they all do have value. Okay, they all bring something to the table. They may not see that. They may not see it tomorrow. They may not see it for a long time, but they do.
Yes, I agree completely. I agree. And it's, as as every educator knows, it is just more and more complex in terms of what we see in the classroom each day in terms of our kids' experiences. And we talk about trauma-informed teaching and just knowing that our kids face, dealing with their own issues with identity and, figuring out where they fit into the big picture. And we've just really got to continue to find ways to connect with those kids and to show them that we are there for them, and that the classroom, while it is a place for learning and growing and developing and helping to get them prepared for the next phase of their life, it's also a place where they can just build some really great lasting relationships that they'll have to remember for the rest of their lives.
Absolutely. And just, we could talk about this for hours, especially, since we both teach high school, our students need us, like you said, they're trying to find their
Yes.
place in this big giant world and where they fit in. It's confusing. It's also scary as well, just because there's some kids that are already essentially out on their own, and there's some kids that are going to be. At some point, all these students are going to be out on their own, having to make these decisions, as individuals. And so we have that experience. We've made mistakes. I tell my kids, I've made mistakes. I'm human as well, believe it or not. But at the same time, all the mistakes that we've made, we learn from, and, we can take those as lessons and improve.
Yes.
So,
Absolutely. I agree.
And I will say this, here is a suggestion. You talk about your students, especially in your gifted class, that they did with the newspaper and getting the community involved. If you haven't already, you ought to check out SDG goals, Sustainable Development Goals. They're put together by the United Nations, and it's, I want to say 38 goals. I may be wrong there, that the United Nations wants to accomplish by the year 2030. And so some of the goals are clean water, clean energy, proper education, things like that. So you can Google it, SDG goals, United Nations. And I really brought those into my classroom because a year ago I had never heard of them. And so it gets your students, thinking about things that are important to them. There's gender equality. There's so many others that, your students should be able to identify with at least one, or you can pick out a couple, and you can really, develop some material that can allow students to think about, something that'll impact the world. So just an idea.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Wonderful, wonderful. I will definitely check that out. I'm always looking for ways to, I guess, make learning relevant, right? We want to make sure that the kids know that everything that we're giving them has some purpose, right? It's not just pushing out content and pushing out homework or practice or whatever the case may be. I want kids to know that, hey, when you come in here and you're learning in this classroom, okay, yeah, we're going to acquire some skills, and we're going to learn how to, engage with texts and write essays and those kinds of things. But in the end, you're going to be able to do something with this. And I'm going to show you what examples of those are in the classroom. So it's really application, real world application, relevant study of the concepts and ideas in the class, making connections with students and their backgrounds. And how am I going to do this? What am I going to do with this when I'm done with school and I leave? Like the Credo Project is a perfect example of that. And kids are surprised. They're like, people do this for a job? Yeah, they do. Imagine this is your job. And some kids are like, wow, this is awesome. And other kids are like, I'm never doing this. I will never do this kind of job. But they've got the chance to experience through blogging something they're passionate about, which is also good. And they figured out ways through that work, even if they don't like the blogging piece, how can I put my skills and my interest to work? And you're right, Dustin, that is so important for us to find ways to connect what we're doing to the real world so that kids know that, school matters. School really, really matters. And that's what I want them to understand when they join me in my class every day.
Yeah, and absolutely. We did a reading passage on clean water, okay? And so one of the tasks that we did was we read on the Flint, Michigan water, which has been, as you know, a problem for several years. And so, my kids that are high schoolers are like, this goes on. I'm like, yes, it goes on in the United States. Believe it or not, yes, Michigan is a little bit further away from Missouri, but this is something that thousands of individuals unfortunately have to live with every day. And so I'm going to share my screen and kind of show you some of these goals. And zoom in my screen.
Yeah, great.
And so I don't know if you can see it, but I have, there's zero hunger, no poverty, decent work and economic growth. There's just, this is just 17 of them, but there's 38, 39 of them. And there's climate action. Okay, there's just so many you can choose from, and you can really tie it into some of the projects that you're doing, especially those big collaborative create projects that you do in the classroom as well.
Yes, those would work wonderful with a Genius Hour or a passion project for sure. Because they really are service oriented and really focused on how do we help to affect change. And so those are terrific. Thank you so much for sharing those. Those will definitely be useful moving forward, because I will have a group of gifted ninth graders again next year who have not done the passion project as I did it when I was teaching junior high. We will be doing that again this coming year. So I will definitely make sure to incorporate those. Thank you for sharing that. That's
Absolutely.
great.
Absolutely. Now, earlier when we were talking about Bloom's Taxonomy, you mentioned your blog, Root to Canopy, and that's what drew me to the work that you were doing. And so I'm going to go and pull up your blog. So what are some things what led you to want to create Root to Canopy? What does that term mean?
Yeah, so first of all, I am a tree freak. I love trees. It's just something about being amongst the trees. It moves me to look at just their strength and their ability to just thrive and survive despite the conditions, and the beauty that they provide, the shade they provide, the nourishment they provide. Like, trees are life, literally. And so I love looking at all kinds of trees and leaves, and it's something that I've enjoyed. But I also, when I think about my love of trees, it directly correlates with everything that we do in the classroom and everything that kids are. Every child is different. Some of them have really strong roots and some of them don't. Some of them are tall and big and strong, and some of them are just a little on the weak or frail side, right? Or they're just growing. Some of them are just like shoots, and others are just grown big and full and matured and have big beautiful leaves to share with everybody, right? Branches and such. And so I kind of took that into my writing. I just really felt like, as a whole child educator, that I label myself as, I'm worried about my kids and care about my kids from the ground up, from where they come from to where they're going. And I want to be able to provide them with everything that they need to continue to grow strong and tall and sturdy, and to be able to provide back, to give back to others, because that's what trees do for us, right? And so that was my approach, and the reason I chose that name. And it really just started out as an idea and just a place for me to kind of reflect on some things. But then I realized, we all know how important reflection is, but I decided I really feel like this could be a good place for me to assemble my knowledge, right? What I know about education, things that I've learned from others, things I've grown from experiences, how I've grown from experiences and such. And so periodically I go in and I update it with some new things, and not as often as I'd like to. I do spend a lot of time writing for publication and presenting and just really kind of getting into whatever I can get into to support others with education. So I get back there every once in a while. I have some resources on there that people can access, just some different pieces that I've published and some presentations I've given, and it's growing. So it will continue to grow. I know that. It's kind of like my online home. It's the place where I feel comfortable just giving back to other teachers. Hey, this is what I know, or this is what I've learned. Hopefully you can use it too. Because, when we grow ourselves, right, then our students are going to grow from that. And that is really my purpose. It's just something that we have to focus on and be very, very deliberate about. And Root to Canopy gives me that place to go in and just kind of reflect on and share what I've discovered about education and being an educator over the years.
Absolutely. And it's a great resource just because you're able to reflect, you're able to talk about the things that, are going well, and the things that, hey, this is something I can improve on. This is what this experience was like. And so some of the resource that you have available, having the blog, there's a lot of great material. And I just love how you have this platform to where you can share these materials, just because, we're all in this together and we're all able to share. That's how we get better, is by working together, not hiding things, but by sharing it, just because you have things to offer. I have things to offer. A teacher in California could have things to offer you for your classroom, and vice versa. So having this place to share all this stuff, is really great to see.
Yeah, it is pretty exciting, and it's nice to know that it does help and does make a difference. I got an email from someone in Texas, Pflugerville, Texas, the other day, and she was like, "Hey, I need some help with this unit planning." And I'm like, "Okay, cool. Like, how are you? And who are you? And where are you from? And how did you find me?" And she mentioned that she stumbled across my blog, and so that was kind of exciting for me to know that, wow, it's working. Like, I am able to help people through my writing and through my work, and I just want to continue to do that in every way possible. We all have growing and learning to do. I know I do for sure. I am, by far an expert in anything, but I do try to do my best. And when things work, I want to share that so other people can maybe use it and have their kids grow from it, or grow themselves as well. So it's good.
Absolutely. And please don't stop. Please keep sharing. Please keep having that impact. It works, and people are reading, they are paying attention. So keep it up.
Thank you.
All right. So with teaching ELA, and with it being 2020, what are some ways you provide equity in materials for your class? Just because, we are a more diverse society, which is a good thing. What are ways you provide equity when it comes to your classroom? It could be from socioeconomic background, religion, ethnicity, orientation. What are some ways that you provide that equity?
Yeah, so first of all, I really like to focus on students being allowed to share their individual experiences. I think that is first and foremost the key to help developing empathy in the classroom, and to helping level the playing field to some degree, by letting kids know that, hey, listen, we're different from one another. People don't have the same opportunities and experiences and so forth. and getting them acclimated to the idea that, fair isn't always equal, right? That we have to, if you've ever seen that picture of the students who are standing behind the fence watching the baseball game, we're seeing it from behind them, and you've got the three students, and they're all different heights, but their boxes are have to be different heights so that they can all see over the fence, right? And so we want to be able to help students in the classroom understand that not everybody has it the same. And so when we build a classroom of students who have good relationships with one another, who respect one another, then students aren't afraid to share in that classroom their experiences, where they come from, why they do what they do or think what they think. And then we've developed the skills together to be able to handle those conversations, sometimes that are really they can be controversial conversations, they can be complex conversations, but we have to know that we've got to be prepared together. We have a relationship, we respect each other, we know one another's stories. How we communicate with one another then matters, right? So I really, really like to have students tell their own stories, but I also like to have students choose their own reading. I encourage students to really branch out and try to read things that maybe they would normally read, but also that they do feel comfortable reading, that helps them to feel more confident about themselves. I try to keep a diverse classroom library. Our librarian, Mrs. Faulkner, is amazing, and she has a wonderful collection of books for students. And so they have a wide range of literature that they can access, and that they can use to kind of look at the world either through their own eyes or the eyes of another. I was sharing the other day, I think you were in a chat with me, Dustin, and we were talking about this in the Sunday night chat. What's that chat? The Believe
Believe
Hope chat?
Yeah, Believe Hope EDU.
Yes. Yes, that's a wonderful chat. And one of the things I commented about literature was, and I heard this from a friend last week, and I believe wholeheartedly, is that we need to let kids have access to literature that serve as both mirrors and windows. Mirrors, the literature that allows students to see themselves, right, reflected in the story, but also literature that serves as windows or doors that allow them to either walk through or look out to see the lives of others. And so it's very, very important that we also build in those opportunities. So, you've got the piece of sharing stories, understanding that we all come from different backgrounds, and that's why we are who we are, and be able to respect that and discuss it, to look at a wide variety of literature, but also bringing what's outside of the classroom into the classroom. We cannot close our doors to what is going on in the world. We cannot. In this day and age, there's so much going on. We live in such a divided country. Educators cannot be afraid of that. It is tough to have those kinds of, charged conversations. Our kids come from the left and from the right. And we need to be able to bring those issues into the classroom, because what I tell them is this: listen, grown folks can't have conversations about this stuff, but you can. And if we can get you in this classroom to have these kinds of sometimes controversial or difficult conversations, then you need to be able to go out and show grown-ups how to do this, because we can't do it. And they really like hearing that they can do something that grown-ups can't do. And believe me, they buy in. We talk about the right ways to voice our opinions and our beliefs so that they're not offensive to others. And we also talk about giving everybody the chance to speak, whether we agree with what they're saying or not. Those are really, really important skills and habits to develop. Habits that we as adults just throw out the window because we think we can just say and do whatever we want to because we're grown and nobody's going to tell us what we can say or do or think or feel, right? And I help kids to understand that that's a choice that adults make. We make that choice, and a lot of times it's why we are in the situation that we're in today, and that it doesn't have to be like that for them, and they can have fruitful debate, and they can express their ideas, and they can accept what others are saying, but still hold on to their own values and beliefs. And so that really encompasses all that I try to put in place in my class to help kids understand that, you know what, we are, just like you say, Dustin, we are one team as educators. Our classrooms are just kind of like a microcosm of the world. They're the world sitting in our classroom. They're the ones who are going to go out and work next to each other in the workforce. And how do we help them to be able to effectively cope so that they are not, living a life of either disappointment or rage or whatever it is that's going to keep them from being the best possible citizen that they can be.
Absolutely. And you made so many good points. You are 100% right. Adults don't know how to have a conversation or be able to disagree with each other, because it just turns into, a big personal attack, which isn't the point of it. I'm sure if we got to, I'm sure when we get to know each other more and more as time goes on, there may be some things that you may have a different view on, or vice versa, and that's okay. We're adults. We know how to take that and not lose who we are as well. And so, and I also think one of the most important things is really teaching our kids that it's okay to disagree. And there's a way to disagree with something without it turning into a big personal attack on something,
Yes.
So that's a tough skill.
So important.
It takes a lot of coaching, a lot of patience, maybe some trial and error, but learning to disagree with someone without essentially losing who you are and attacking that person for having that belief is just a difficult task, but it's something that, we need to do as educators as well.
I agree completely. We really do need to teach our kids to do that, because while we know how to do it as adults, and you're right, we know how to do it, but we make the choice sometimes, some of us, not to do it, right? We believe what we believe, and, I believe this way, and you're not going to change my mind. And gosh, it's so counterproductive. It's why we're in this boat that we're in. And everyone knows it, but yet we continue down that path. And as educators, we cannot allow that for our young people. We have got to help them to develop the skills, like you said, to agree to disagree. There is nothing wrong with that. We've existed as a society up till now with that mindset. It just seems like today, and I think everybody can agree, the media plays some role in that, in terms of, what we look at. We choose also what we look at. And we have to help kids to be media literate consumers, so that when they see something, no matter what they're watching or where they're watching it, they're able to use their critical thinking skills to dissect that, right? That, am I going to use this as evidence to support what I'm saying, or should I even, or do I need to just, maybe this isn't the most or the best source. But we just haven't got our kids there yet, and we've got to do that soon, because with technology, the evolution of social media, our kids are going to continue to be inundated by information, and they need the skills that allow them to be able to rapidly kind of dissect and evaluate that. And we're back to those, higher level Bloom skills, and the, level 3 and level 4 depth of knowledge, Webb's depth of knowledge, where they've got to say, listen, I've got this information. What am I going to do with it? What is it saying to me? And what am I going to do with it? And that's really, really important. Why we have to focus, again, we say those foundational skills, remember, understand, apply, are really, really important. But to get through those, we've got to do that quickly so that they can get to that evaluate and analyze piece.
Absolutely. And it's just, so many things that you're mentioning. I want to say, and this is just my belief, that a lot of students, or just individuals, are afraid to disagree or someone's afraid to say, and they disagree with what they're saying because they think it's attack on them personally. No, that's not the case. It's nothing personal.
Yeah.
It's just, our perspectives are different, and that's perfectly okay. You may see things one way, I see one thing, another way, but that's okay. We can still coexist. We can still work together. We can still have that friendship, whatever. It's not a personal attack. It's just, we just have a different perspective on it, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you know, as a teacher of color, Dustin, you know, I'm biracial. My father's
Mhm.
Black, my mother's white, and I work in a, you know, like I said, a fairly conservative district where a lot of my students are white. I have to help my kids understand, listen, we're going to have difficult conversations, and your background is your background. And what you've been raised to believe, I'm not holding that against you, right? We're here to break it down and figure out what's right versus what's wrong. And you help me to see your perspective, and I'll help you to see my perspective. And it works most of the time. You know, it's gotten a little more challenging in the last few years, but nonetheless, I have to let my kids know that, listen, I, I am who I am, and that means that I love you and I'm here for you. And I don't care what you were taught or how you were raised or what you believe right now. What I want you to know is that I respect you and I respect that. And we're going to have the kinds of conversations where we're going to be able to see eye to eye on something. You might convince me of some things, I might convince you of some things. If we're not doing that as educators, Dustin, we don't need to be doing it, period. White, Black, whatever. You know, we've got to help kids understand that, you know, we live in a multicultural, you know, society filled with so many different kinds of people. And if we want to be happy citizens, happy human beings, then we've got to learn to live amongst one another. And, you know, no grudges held, no anything. I've got to teach my kids to see eye to eye with one another, and to just develop empathy. Empathy is so very important in my class. And I've got a really great post on my blog about teaching empathy. If you haven't checked that out, and some experiences that I've had with kids going through that process, and the discoveries that they've made within themselves, and you know, the revelations. It's just been really exciting to see. So we start out the year with the E word. That's our word all year long. It's embedded into everything we do. Empathy, empathy, empathy. And so by the end of a school year with me, whether you've had me once or had me twice, you will know that empathy is at work every single day, every single day.
Yeah, and it's truly an amazing word. And once we really develop that empathy, not only are we better students, but we're better people in general. So thank you for teaching that, you know, and believing in it. It's a amazing word. So last thing I do want to ask you, okay, as you see behind me, it says we are one team, okay? That's what I'm all about. So when you
Yeah.
see we are one team, what does that mean to you?
Oh, I love that question. And I remember the first time I checked out your site, and the first time we really connected, I'm like, what is this? I mean, yeah, I know we're one team, but like, who is we are one team? And what does that mean? Am I the team? And I remember you had replied to me about, you know, I'm so looking forward to working and connecting with you. I'm like, oh, really? What? Like, what? This is super cool. And it was just the kind of reaching out that you do to folks, Dustin, and the connections that you make, and you know, the videos that you share, and the participation online. You know, I see you in lots of places. Really just exhibits that idea of we are one team. We are one team. Teachers, I think, are there for one another. They know their role as educators involves finding ways to be the best educator possible. And we can't do that without one another. You know, we've got to have conversations like we've had today. We've got to engage with one another outside our immediate circle. We Are One Team isn't just a team somewhere of folks in a room. It's every teacher everywhere, whether they know it or not. And, you know, recently I had published a short post on developing your own personal professional learning community. And what does that mean to have a personalized professional learning community? And that really means finding those people who can help you become better, who are your team of people, your go-to people that will support you in getting you where you need to be. We are stressed these days as educators. We were stressed before coronavirus, and we are definitely stressed now. But I don't know one teacher who feels like, and if you're out there somewhere, please reach out to me or Dustin. I know he would help you too. I don't know one teacher out there that feels alone in this thing. And that makes me so happy. It makes me so happy. It makes me happy to know that I'm a part of something. And again, if there's somebody out there, we're here for you. Right, Dustin? We're here for them, aren't we?
Absolutely, absolutely.
and and that's what being one, we are one team means to me. And I don't know how it happened. I guess I have called divine intervention. I don't know, but to be connected in this way with other educators, you and we are one team, has just been the blessing of a lifetime in the worst case possible, right? Here we are in a pandemic, locked in our offices. I told somebody the other day, Dustin, I said, it's crazy. We never thought about what was behind us until we moved into quarantine, right? It just didn't matter what was really behind us. And now virtual learning has given literal meaning to the term MySpace. So it's just really funny how this crazy time that we're in and this way that we're communicating has allowed so many teachers to reach out even farther than they ever imagined and connect. I did not know 3 months ago that I would make a friend in Missouri and we'd be sitting here on a Tuesday morning having a video chat over YouTube. So, man, it's amazing. So thank you, Dustin, for everything that you're doing for everybody that you meet and interact with, and for your kids and your passion for education, all of it. I am so, so grateful.
Absolutely. The feeling is absolutely mutual. The passion, the energy, the kindness, the empathy that you bring is truly wonderful to see. And it's so great to see that there are tens of thousands, even millions of educators that want to grow, that want to get better, that want to collaborate. And I truly do believe that, all of us are colleagues, teachers in New York, teachers in Oregon, teachers overseas, we're all colleagues, we're all working together. And so that's really what We Are One Team is. And you mentioned how we're all in this together. One of the worst things we can do is to make a teacher feel like they're alone. Okay. Unfortunately, there's a lot of teachers that get in that situation, whether it's their colleagues, whether it's administrators. There's a number of different ways that teachers feel alone. And that's one of the worst things we can do, because we end up losing a lot of really good teachers as a result of that. And so it's really bringing all of us together, having that kindness, having that compassion, that collaboration, and really being there to support each other, tell these stories, have these conversations that me and you are having right now, and then I've had with others that I'm going to continue to have in the future. So this has really taken off. I've learned so much, and I absolutely love what I do. I love being in the classroom. Distance learning will do for now, but I'm excited to get back into the classroom when that day comes, and collaborating with you and with so many as well. So again, thank you for everything. It's been wonderful.
It has. I'm so appreciative of all that you do and all the wonderful educators you bring to us every day. So please, please keep bringing this to educators. We need it very, very much. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I have a new post that came out today. A good teacher friend of mine down in Texas, we had an interview, a written interview. She's an administrator just outside of Austin. And then on YouTube, you can check it out today, a new post. She works for Inspire Citizens, which is based out of China. She is from London originally, so we talk a lot about SDG goals that we talked about earlier, compassion, and just, being global citizens. So go and check it out today and listen to it while you're working. A lot of great conversation as well. So
I will. Thank you, Dustin, so much. I appreciate you very, very much. Thank you.
absolutely. And we're going to go off record. So again, I can't thank you enough for coming on.
Okay, thanks.